Not executives would be given bonuses for 2023. You said you weren't ruling it out. When you came to this committee, you have confirmed once again that you were not ruling it out. In fact, you confirmed that a decision would be made by the end of March. Now it's May, and so I'm curious, are you going to be awarded a bonus for 2023?
As I said at the time, Madam Chair, as I said at the time, we have a process which is very rigorous. After internal deliberations with the Board of Directors.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
And racism, including from the guy who spent the first half of his adult life as a practicing racist, dressing up in hideous racist costumes so many times he can't.
The opposition knows that to make an accusation directly at the character of a single person is not appropriate.
Mr. Speaker, the leader opposite is showing us exactly what shameful, spineless leadership looks like. He shakes hands with white nationalists and then goes to actively court the support of those members and has the nerve. Get it together, Greg! Any idea what you're doing?
IT contracts, even though they admit they do no IT work. $250 million. WTF.
Here, here. And I say to him, come to my riding, my diverse riding in Durham, and try that on us, where we have Christians and Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, and Jews living together, all people who believe that mothers and fathers matter.
Just want enough to warm it up, son. I don't want to set it on fire. It's very easy to set it on fire.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and you have a right to defend your house with firearms.
There's no chance, bud.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises. Now,
We've worked concretely on the ground with partners, including with the government of BC, for example, to move forward on decriminalization in a way that is showing positive impacts across BC. We will continue to be grounded in evidence as we take action to save lives and keep Canadians safe.
The only solution is to completely reverse the Trudeau NDP radical experiment of legalizing drugs and letting people smoke meth in hospital rooms and blow the smoke in the face of nurses, letting addicts shoot up heroin next to children in parks. From the very beginning, this was a radical, senseless Trudeau NDP experiment that was doomed for death and destruction, and sadly, the data shows that that's exactly what it has caused.
All right, gang, what's going on? We're just about ready to kick off question period. Should be a pretty fun show. Hello to everybody. I'd like to say hello to James Vahey, Kirk, Sheila. What's up, guys? Always good to see you. Two Flips, what's up, my man? Shar 01, how are you? What's going on? Cryptomaria, good to see you. Dive Crew Canada, thanks for the heads up. Sorry, guys, I was running for 9 minutes here, not knowing my signal wasn't going out. That's live and learn. Domino B, what's up? Good to see you. We're going to have a wild show today. True Blue, what's up, brother? Good day. Thank God it's Friday. Welcome to the show. Common Sense, good to see you always. Maple Syrup, 123, what's shaking? And that might be everybody that I've seen so far. If I missed anybody, hey, Minik, what's up? We're going to just jump into the show, guys, because that's the next thing to do. We do have question period ready to go here. Should be a pretty freaky Friday. Usually is.
Are you considering going solar in Nova Scotia?
I'm in Nova Scotia. I'm not going solar.
Honorable député de Drummond.
Here we
Madame la
go.
Présidente.
We're
The
off.
honourable member for Drummond.
Should be starting in
Madam Speaker,
the next couple of minutes.
Drummond's Volunteer Action Centre is celebrating its 45th birthday, and I was there to celebrate it. The room was full of people, generous volunteers who make calls, support people, bring vulnerable individuals and seniors to their medical appointments. They support people who are going through tumultuous periods in their lives. Last year, they helped 14,000 people and 200 organizations with 37,000 hours of volunteer work. They care deeply about people. We're so lucky to have them. This organization has been working for 45 years. It does so much. It has a tax clinic, a Meals on Wheels service, and volunteers are at the very heart of what the organization does. They create friendships, help people, and inspire the entire community. Happy birthday. Thank you for being there to help people in our community.
The honourable member for New Brunswick Southwest.
What's up, Two
Speaker,
Flips? I didn't know. I can't remember if I caught you or not.
Labrador has contributed much to our great dominion, but few gifts from the Rock rival that of the now departed Rex Murphy. Inspired by his firm belief that Canada was founded on great principles, had achieved great things in the past, and could and should do much more in the future, Rex stood on guard for all of us with great wit and wisdom throughout his many newspaper columns and on-air commentaries. Rex was brave, but without pretense. He despised the smug. He understood and championed everyday Canadians, especially those who struggled. He appreciated the inherent fallen nature of humankind, as well as our ability to rise above our failings through the pursuit of virtue. God bless Canada, God bless Newfoundland Labrador, and God bless the soul of Raphael Rex Murphy.
The honourable member for Hamilton Mountain.
Speaker, the Hamilton Reads title for 2024 is Chrysalis, the first book by
She's a
Hamilton
beast.
Mountain's own Anuja Varghese. It won a Governor General's Literary Award, a Writers' Trust Award, and several other honors. It's a book dedicated to, quote, all the girls and women who don't see themselves in most stories. You are worthy of reflection despite what you've been told. And Speaker, it's a really fun read. Anuja told me she's always looking for ways to empower women and girls, and sometimes that means you get to be a shapeshifter and eat your enemies. She says fantasy fiction helps us let loose, wonder what if, and consider difficult subjects like racism, homophobia, and misogyny in stories rather than statistics. Anuja unleashed her inner writer when she moved to Hamilton and found the community that inspired her and the support that helped her flourish. I want to congratulate Anuja on her success, thank her for the delicious stories, and tell her Hamilton is very glad she now calls our city home.
Oral questions.
Here we go, guys. We're kicking it off. Who do we have? Finley's going to rock it.
9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the drugs, disorder, and death. Open access to meth and fentanyl is killing Canadians. BC parents are terrified that children will step on dirty needles on soccer fields. Nurses are breathing in fentanyl smoke as they treat patients in hospitals. On May 21st, Parliament will vote on our motion to ensure this extremist drug experiment is never repeated. Will the Prime Minister vote to reject expansion and prioritize treatment and recovery? Yes or no?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire à la ministre des Dépendances.
Too many Canadians are dying every day from an ever-changing illegal toxic drug supply. The opposition leader talks about investing in treatment, but Conservatives cut 2/3 of drug treatment fund when they were last in government. Let's talk about what saves lives. Safe consumption sites, accessible social and healthcare services, prevention, treatment, and harm reduction. This is a public health crisis, not a criminal justice issue.
The member for South Surrey White Rock.
Well, after 9 years, Madam Speaker, it's on them, and they have to do something about it. The Liberal leadership race is well underway, I see, and it seems like the new guy is just like the old guy. Mark Carney testified at the Senate, and surprise, surprise, he announced his support for this Prime Minister's failed carbon tax. Carbon tax Carney couldn't commit to cutting a penny from the Prime Minister's reckless spending. These random Liberals really have a lot in common. If carbon tax Carney won't, and this Prime Minister won't, will someone over there have Canadians' backs and axe the tax?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, if we're going to talk about having Canadians' backs, let's talk about the work that we're doing to protect the environment while making the life more affordable for them through the carbon rebates. Right. In fact, if you look at economists, and over 300 economists have signed a letter stating this very fact, Canadians receive more on average through the rebate than they pay through any carbon pricing. In fact, in Ontario, the average
So this is remarkable. The paper tablet created for people who like to take notes. It even feels
through the carbon rebate. I'm listening to the economists, and I'm seeing it standing up and having the backs for Canadians.
Honourable member for South Surrey White Rock.
Well, I'm listening to the parliamentary budget officer who says the exact opposite to what that member just said. Inflationary budgets destroy the working class with high interest rates. After 9 years, mortgages, down payments, rents have all doubled. 90% of young Canadians are stuck in housing hell with their dreams of home ownership shattered. Those who do own fear they can't qualify for renewal. Mortgage delinquencies are up 50% overall, 135% in Ontario, 62% in BC. This is
all Parliamentary Secretary.
Once again, if the member opposite wants to talk about what the parliamentary budget officer said, he said 8 out of 10 families end up with more money at the end of the year through the carbon rebates, through the carbon price. But also, if we're going to talk about protecting homes, at the very moment that houses were burning in Kelowna Lake Country from climate crisis fires, wildfires, that member was opposing the carbon price. The carbon price that actually results in a third of our emissions.
The honourable member for Charlebourg.
What's up, Owlette? How are you? Good to see you.
Madam Speaker, the Governor of the Bank of Canada has repeatedly confirmed that the Prime Minister's spending is keeping interest rates high. Many mortgage holders will face sharp increases in payments when they renew their mortgages over the next couple of years. This is the direct result of this Prime Minister's $500 billion in centralizing inflationary spending backed by the Bloc. When will the Prime Minister and the Bloc stop their out-of-control spending? The Honourable Minister, my colleague, talks about sound management and what was the record of the Conservative leader when he was housing minister? He got 6 affordable housing units built, whereas in my colleague's riding over the past year, hundreds of units have been built. We signed a historic agreement with the government of Quebec. The honourable member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Madam Speaker, the minister's been repeating the same infantile answer while the Liberal government has doubled the cost of housing. July 1st is shaping up to be a disaster for those looking for a place to live. One of the local organizations says that we're heading for the worst July 1st of our lives. This Bloc-backed government has created disastrous economic conditions for people looking for housing. Will the Prime Minister shape up and stop the inflationary spending that's only putting pressure on the economy and on Canadians? The Honourable Minister. Good morning, Madam Speaker. He talked about childish calculations. Well, yeah, this is an easy one. Counting to 6. 6 affordable housing units is what the Conservative leader managed to get built in his tenure as housing minister. So talk about childish, whereas 222 units have been built in the members' riding in cooperation with the government in Quebec. The honourable member for Manicouagan. Madam Speaker, the unfortunate thing about the member for Glengarry Prescott Russell's insults is that they hindered opportunities for substantive conversations about French. While he publicly humiliated himself, the report of the Commissioner of Official Languages went almost unnoticed. But the Commissioner severely criticized the federal government, calling it reluctant to offer services in French, and reluctant about allowing Francophones to work in their own language. Instead of insulting Quebecers, shouldn't the Liberals have announced this week that they're finally going to force the federal government to respect Francophones? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Look, on this side of the House, we've always been there for Francophones in Canada and in Quebec. And I find it really interesting coming from my colleague because when the Bloc tries to monopolize this file, they're bothered by the fact that our government and my colleague from Glengarry Prescott Russell, all the Liberals on this side who are from Quebec, and I would say our whole caucus even, defends French in Quebec and all across the country. We're the only government that does that. The honourable member for Manicouagan. Madam Speaker, the Liberal member for Glengarry Prescott Russell devoted his 15 minutes of fame to denying the decline of French in Quebec. An odd choice. A very odd choice at a time when the Commissioner of Official Languages is pointing out that in his region along the Ottawa River, that's where he gets the most complaints from. These include complaints from federal public servants who are unable to work in French. The Commissioner said the complaints received attest to the fact that many federal institutions don't take their language obligations seriously. If the Liberals don't take the future of French seriously, why should the federal government? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, rather, let's talk about our government's investments under our action plan. $1.4 billion for the next 5 years to help French. Madam Speaker, we're the only government that has acknowledged the decline in French. We've modernized the Official Languages Act. We're working with Treasury Board. We're working with the Commissioner. And we fully understand the issue. Here on this side of the House, we believe in French, they don't.
A recent report reveals alarming rates of poverty and food insecurity in Nova Scotia, the highest in the country. But the Liberals, like the Conservatives before them, are choosing to reward grocery CEOs with corporate handouts instead of cracking down on their greed that is driving up food costs. So while the Conservatives vote against nutritious meals for kids at school, the Liberals are letting food conglomerates gouge Canadians at the till. Why is this government allowing the CEO's greed to go unchecked at the costs of Canadians going hungry?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I agree with the Honourable Member that
Turnbull.
it's certainly hypocritical for Conservatives to cite food bank lineups as something that they care about when voting against a national school food program that's going to feed over 400,000 kids per year. That's hypocritical if I've ever heard it before. But it's very good to hear my member or my colleague in the NDP party, who we've worked with successfully to update our Competition Act in successive rounds, which are going to improve prices for Canadians and increase competition, which is, I think, vitally important.
Great answer. Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Madam Speaker, rent is going up faster than Canadians can afford, with families relying on credit cards more and more to buy food and necessities. In my riding of Nanaimo Ladysmith, rent went up over 9% last year alone. People can't cut back any more than they already are. Yet the Liberals are sitting on their hands and letting corporate greed drive up costs. This plan is not working. When will the Liberals have the courage to crack down on the corporate greed driving up rent and food prices?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague for the question, and I point to the recent federal budget where we announced that we would be taking measures to prevent corporate landowners from buying up single-family homes, but also advancing measures to protect renters and to bring down the cost of rent by adding more supply. We are moving forward with programs that introduce low-cost financing for more rental construction. We've got new subsidies for affordable housing and cooperative housing and an acquisition for nonprofits who can actually take affordable homes and keep them affordable in perpetuity. In addition, Madam Speaker, we're moving forward with a Renters' Bill of Rights and a series of other measures that are designed to protect the interest of renters for whom the cost of living has simply become too high.
The honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkin.
There's a lot of green chairs
Madam
today,
Speaker,
guys.
after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, finding an affordable rental is only getting harder. Despite their record spending, a new report says that rents in Canada increased 9.3% annually in April. It's gotten so bad that people seeking an affordable rental, their only choice, Madam Speaker, is to laugh or cry. Given the dire situation of these renters, could the Minister of Housing please enlighten us as to whether he considers the performance of his government's housing strategy a comedy of errors or a tragedy of oversights?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, if my honourable friend is interested in a tragedy of oversights, I would direct him to the plan put forward by his leader when it comes to housing, which doesn't advance a single measure designed to help renters with the cost of living. Madam Speaker, his plan that he is now campaigning on would literally increase taxes on rental construction in this country by putting the GST back on those construction projects. We have removed the GST, Madam Speaker. We have introduced low-cost financing to build more rental supply to bring down the cost across the ecosystem, across the country. In addition, Madam Speaker, we are putting more money on the table to provide affordable housing options with the Conservatives.
The honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkin and Nicola.
A lot of that spending doesn't kick in until after the next election, so I don't think that promise is worth the paper the minister is written on. This week, the Bank of Canada warned, and I quote, higher debt servicing costs reduce a household's financial flexibility, making them more financially vulnerable if their income declines or they face an unexpected material expense, end quote. Considering the Prime Minister has doubled our debt and has borrowed more money than all Canadian Prime Ministers combined, could he please explain how this warning does not equally apply to his government?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, first to correct the misinformation, there is money flowing to projects, including in that member's province as we speak. We've signed multi-billion-dollar deals with provinces to build housing. We've invested billions more to now help the construction of nearly 500,000 units since the inception of the National Housing Strategy. But Madam Speaker, he seems to ignore the fact that Canada maintains one of the healthiest fiscal positions amongst advanced economies. I expect he's trying to distract because they've had a very bad week when Canadians are focused on their use of the notwithstanding clause to erode important rights that are protected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Madam Speaker, we will move forward with...
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, deficit spending caused skyrocketing inflation, which caused higher interest rates, which is causing higher mortgage payments. Right. The Bank of Canada confirmed that the Prime Minister's wasteful spending is keeping interest rates higher for longer. Now the Bank of Canada is warning, when compared with origination, that the average median mortgage payment will rise more than 20% in 2025 and 30% in 2026. Families can't afford this. Will this government stop their deficit spending so families can keep their homes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, what I would like to ask the member opposite who just asked that question is how does she face her constituents when at the very time that homes were being evacuated, people were losing homes to climate-induced wildfires, she was fighting the price on carbon pollution and fighting our work on making sure that we fight climate change. This is what's actually putting homes at risk. We're going to be supporting our firefighters who are fighting those fires. We're going to be doing what we need to fight climate change, and we are protecting Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Madam Speaker, after 9 years, this Prime Minister just isn't worth the cost. Right. For families with variable rate mortgages with fixed payments, it's even worse. Median mortgage payments will increase 60% by 2026. Working class paychecks have been shredded by this NDP Liberal government. Common sense Conservatives would bring in a dollar-for-dollar law to fund $1 of savings for every new dollar spent. This is how families run their households. Can the minister explain how Canadian families are supposed to come up with hundreds or thousands of dollars more a month just to keep their homes?
Great question. The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, we understand the very serious challenges that families are facing when it comes to the cost of housing, which is why we put a plan on the table that's designed to solve Canada's national housing crisis. What's fascinating about the member's own riding, we've actually invested $31.5 million in that community to build thousands of homes, which she and her party oppose. Moreover, the Conservative plan lists only 22 communities in the entire country that can benefit from their plans. Kelowna is not on the list. I hope she has a hard time explaining that to her constituents who thanked us for the investment we made to build housing in her community.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Madam Speaker, Quebecers are suffering after 9 years of this Liberal government's wasteful spending and what that's doing to the cost of living. This Prime Minister's overspending knows no bounds, and the Bloc supports all the reckless spending. The Bloc voted to hire another 110,000 federal public servants. The Bloc is okay with sending Quebecers money to Ottawa, and they call themselves the defenders of Quebec. When will this Bloc-backed Prime Minister stop making Quebecers suffer even more with his senseless spending sprees? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, my colleague is referring to sound management. Did you know that during his entire tenure, the Conservative leader, when he was Minister of Housing, built 6 affordable housing units? You saw that right, Madam Speaker, 6 units. And in Lévis, 205 affordable housing units have been built in recent months, and we expect to build 8,000 under our deal with the Government of Quebec. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. After 9 years of this Liberal government, there's been 9 years of suffering for Quebecers, budget chaos, criminals on the loose, unaffordable food and housing. And instead of thinking about fixing the budget, the Bloc supports $500 billion in reckless inflationary spending. The more this Bloc-backed government spends, the more Quebecers suffer. The Prime Minister and the Bloc aren't worth the cost. Could they spare a thought for Quebecers and stop wasting their money? The Honourable Minister.
Duclos is a really
Thank
creepy
you,
guy,
Speaker.
right?
I'm so
he was going
pleased
hard
to
at
have a
Poilievre right
second
there.
opportunity to talk about the 205 affordable housing units that we have created in the members' riding because of the leadership of this government and the Government of Quebec. 205 affordable units that have been built in the last few months. There's more coming, unfortunately, and this is less good news for the Conservative leader because during his tenure, only 6 units of this kind were built in the entire country. The Honourable Member for Pontigny. Madam Speaker, while Ottawa keeps saying all is well in the fight against climate change, the experts have never been so pessimistic. The Guardian surveyed 380 IPCC climate specialists. 77% of them believe global warming will surpass 2.5 degrees, far above the target set out in the Paris Agreement. More than 3 out of 4 experts believe that governments and the oil lobby are leading us to a disaster. Meanwhile, this government inaugurates the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Do they have their priorities right? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, 2 weeks ago, our report showed that our emissions were dropping. Under the Conservatives, they were on an uptick, but we have changed things and emissions are coming down in Canada. So we're doing what needs to be done. We're getting it right. We're on a good trajectory. And when you look at the data, it shows, the Honourable Member for Repentigny, 77% of climate experts think we're heading for disaster. Only 6% think there's still a chance of meeting the Paris targets. Meanwhile, in Ottawa, the Liberals are inaugurating their new tar sands oil pipeline, and we have the Conservative, whose only vaguely environmental measure is their crusade against Tim Hortons, paper straws, and lids. Frankly, it's pathetic. What's it going to take for Canada to listen to science and stop sabotaging the fight against climate change? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, I fully agree that when you see that the Conservatives are taking issue with Tim Hortons straws because they're trying to adjust to climate change and recycle more, I really don't understand their objection. But here on this side, it's quite the opposite. We are doing what needs doing to reduce emissions. And UN study shows that we're on the right track. So if the Bloc could keep working with us, we can have more clean energy here in Canada.
Lakes Brook. Speaker, in Food
Go.
Ontario's 2023 reports, over 800,000 Ontarians accessed food banks, up 38% from the previous year, which was the largest single year ever increase ever recorded. Even worse, a report by Canada's food professor found that nearly 60% of Canadians are eating expired food to make ends meet. The cost of food, fueled by the carbon tax and inflation, are causing families to suffer. When will the Prime Minister admit his carbon tax scheme has failed and axe the tax?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Disingenuous. That's what you call it when someone says they care about something but then do the exact opposite. That's today's Conservatives for you. They claim to care about people in food bank lineups, but oppose our plan to feed 400,000 more children per year. They claim to care about housing, but oppose our investments to build 3.9 million more homes by 2031.
Shame.
They claim to care about affordability, but oppose our investments to help Canadians with the cost of seeing a dentist, getting childcare, or accessing life-saving medication.
Shame.
It's clear Conservatives would make cuts that hurt families and a big...
Member for Haliburton, Commercial Lakes Brock.
Speaker, those Liberal policies are not working. I just talked about the rising cost of food. 3 out of 5 Canadians are eating expired food just to survive. More Ontarians than ever are using food banks. In my own area, the Kawartha Lakes Food Source reports that total visits to the food banks they serve have increased by 10% to almost 14,000. After 9 years of this carbon tax rhetoric, I get that it's hard for the Prime Minister to admit he's not worth the cost, but the facts speak for themselves. When will the Prime Minister admit his failed carbon tax doesn't work?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The facts are, Madam Speaker, that Conservatives will never stand up when they have the opportunity to support Canadians. They won't support feeding more hungry children. They won't support building more homes. They won't support access to life-saving medication. They are disingenuous at best. The hypocrisy is over the top. We see every day in this House that they complain, they holler from the other side, they play politics, they advance slogans and not solutions. Here we are standing up for Canadians. I don't know what they're doing on the other side.
Honourable Member for Red Deer, Lacombe.
After 9 years of reckless spending, Canadians are at a breaking point. With record demand at our food banks, we have now learned that 60% of Canadians have resorted to eating expired food. Yet this NDP Liberal government can't help themselves. They have hiked the carbon tax another 23% on April 1st as part of their plan to quadruple it by 2030. Why does this Prime Minister hate Canadians who just want to heat their home, feed their kids, and drive to work? Why won't he just axe the tax?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, Conservatives talk down our economy every day in this House, while in reality Canada's economy has shown great resilience despite the global shocks that it's been under. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio, the lowest deficit in the G7, a AAA credit rating that's been reaffirmed. Warren Buffett, while talking about investing in Canada, says we do not feel uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form putting money into Canada. The IMF, in the most recent fiscal monitor, rated Canada as #1 for budget balance, and this year's budget puts our healthy national balance sheet to work.
The Honourable Member for Moose Jaw, Lake Centre, Lanigan.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. Food banks are on the brink. Demand is up and donations are down. The Moose Jaw Food Bank helped nearly 8,000 households in 2023, up 58%. Madam Speaker, Moose Jaw has a population of 33,000 people. The sad reality is that this is what this government has created. When will the Prime Minister axe a tax to make food affordable again for Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, it is so rich hearing the Conservatives again cite food bank lineups and continually rage farm off the suffering of Canadians when they will not step up when given the opportunity to support feeding 400,000 more kids per year. This is something that I advocated for many years before getting into politics. I know many members of this House are encouraged by the fact that our government has made a $1 billion commitment to feed more hungry children in this country. I don't understand how the
Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
We know that the Liberals are out of touch with everyday Canadians, and Conservatives are worse. After voting no to free medication, the member for Lambton Kent Middlesex wants people to know the real problem isn't that they have to pay out of pocket for care. No, the real problem is Tim Hortons and their new paper coffee cups. While New Democrats are getting free dental care and pharmacare for Canadians, Liberals delay and Conservatives obstruct support for people. Oh, and also they blast coffee lids. Why is this government, like the Conservatives, so completely out to lunch with the reality of everyday Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for her advocacy. There's nothing more fundamental. You want to talk about liberty? There's nothing more fundamental than having the liberty and autonomy over your own body. And it was so disappointing to see Conservative MPs out making speeches trying to tell our daughters and our sisters what they can do with their bodies. Well, I'm here to say that our party, the Liberal Party, and our Prime Minister and every member of our caucus stands firmly behind not only a woman's right to choose when it comes to making a choice over her body, but to make sure that she has the reproductive medicine so she has full autonomy and control over her own body.
The Honourable Member for Port Moody Coquitlam.
It's National Caregiver Month, and 50% of women are taking care of their elderly parents or loved ones with a disability. And 1 in 5 of those caregivers report spending more than $1,000 a month to take care of their loved one. And these costs are only going up. The Liberals keep letting women down. For years, the Liberals promised families a simple, refundable caregiver tax credit. They haven't delivered. When will the Liberals give women the respect they deserve and finally make the caregiver tax credit refundable?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, our government has stepped up and implemented the law. We have introduced the disability benefit, and this benefit is the single largest line item in the budget, $6.1 billion over 6 years. This is an important first step, a step that will help Canadians alleviate poverty. We need to build upon this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable, l'Honourable Député de Lac-Saint-Louis.
The Minister of Sport and Physical Activity has said all along that Canadians deserve a safe, inclusive, and welcoming sports system. Our sports system needs to be grounded in human rights. Accountability, integrity, and safety need to be at the center of sport governance and operations. Can the Minister update the House on her progress to create a safer sports system in Canada, one that reflects and celebrates our Canadian values?
The Honourable Minister of Sports.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We've heard very clearly about the need for systemic reform and culture change in sport. Survivors have bravely come forward so that we can learn, better protect our kids, and improve our systems and processes. What's been going on in sport, the maltreatment, the abuse, the discrimination, is unacceptable and has to stop. And that's why we announced the creation of the Future in Sport Commission, the membership of which we announced yesterday. Madam Speaker, along with the member from Lac-Saint-Louis, all of us here in this House, indeed all Canadians, need to build for our children the sports system that's safe and that they deserve.
Hear, hear.
Honourable Member for Langley-Eldergrove.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, it is clear he is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder. His radical experiment in British Columbia with taxpayer-funded hard drugs and legalized street drugs has led to more crime, chaos, and disorder. Common Sense Conservatives have put forward a motion to put an end to this risky experimentation. So, will the Liberals vote with us to ban hard drugs and to offer recovery and hope instead?
Yes.
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Honorable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madame la Présidente,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. From the beginning, what we have offered is to help people through treatment, harm reduction, strengthening legislation. We are here to help people, to accompany them through their journeys. Everyone deserves full support. No one chooses to become addicted to drugs, and that's why we're there to help everyone.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder caused by his wacko policies. That's right. It's wacko to allow drug use in parks, hospitals, and playgrounds. It's wacko that this government's policy is exposing kids and healthcare workers to lethal drugs. Will the Prime Minister and his government support our common sense motion to ban hard drugs and offer recovery, or will they continue with his wacko drug policies of legalized use of meth and fentanyl in children's parks?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
thank you, Madam Speaker. We've engaged with experts with a range of views to learn from current experiences and inform this practice moving forward. We're working with all federally funded programs and have ramped up mitigation and enforcement measures. We expect provinces and territories to do the same, and the evaluation is ongoing. We will do what we need to do.
The Honourable Member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Madam Speaker, having eyes, why can't the Liberals and NDP see the death and destruction the radical drug experiment is having in Canada? Having ears, why can't they hear the cries of weeping parents and the loved ones of 42,000 who have died from opioids? When will the Liberals and NDP realize that their wacko safe supply and hard drug legalization is destroying this nation? Will they vote with common sense Conservatives to ban hard drugs, stop taxpayer-funded drugs, and put that money into detox and recovery?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madame la Présidente, c'est justement parce qu'on est...
Madam Speaker, we do listen to experts, and we are attuned to people's needs, the needs of those who are on the streets using drugs. That's why we have options and solutions like strengthening legislation, harm reduction, treatment, and supervised consumption. Those are the steps we're taking.
Madam Speaker, these Liberals are more offended by their policies being called wacko than they are by finding needles on kids' soccer fields or skyrocketing overdose rates. Conservatives have put forward a motion calling on the government to ban hard drugs and offer recovery programs across Canada. Will this government vote in support of a common sense motion, or will they continue pearl clutching over words like wacko?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
We had such hopes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Harm reduction is healthcare. Harm reduction is the door to the system. Safe consumption sites have responded to more than 53,000 overdoses since 2017. Our government has invested $200 billion to support provinces and territories delivering services needed in addition to the $1 billion we have directly invested to address this crisis. We will use every tool at our disposal to end the toxic drug and overdose crisis.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. 117 days. The federal government has been ignoring its civilian employees at Quebec's military bases for 117 days. They're on strike. Well, the government cannot ignore them anymore because their representatives from Saint-Jean, Bagotville, and Valcartier are here today. They're here to ask why Quebecers have the lowest wages in Canada, to ask why Quebecers are treated like second-rate workers, and to ask why the Liberals have been ignoring them for 117 days. Will the government level the pay scale and stop discriminating against Quebec employees in the forces? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate my colleague's question because it gives me the opportunity to talk about an announcement we made in April with the well-being services of the Canadian Armed Forces. We reached a settlement of non-public fund workers in Kingston and Petawawa. This agreement we've reached will increase by 13.75% the salary over the next few years. No one is paid at minimum wage, and we hope that those who are on strike will reach a resolution, and we encourage them to come back to the table. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Historically, the majority of civilian employees in the forces have been women in Quebec, and they're right to wonder why the federal government is discriminating against them. For example, they're right to ask why a financial services assistant in Bagotville deserves $10 less than someone doing exactly the same job in Ottawa. Strikers are right to demand equal treatment on all Canadian Forces bases. And at a time when the armed forces are struggling to recruit, they should be demonstrating that they respect their employees. They are ready to come back to the table. They will be suggesting a new contract at 3:30 today. Will DND finally listen to them? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Once again, I thank my colleague for her question, and I appreciate the question because we do know that it's possible to reach solutions and agreements together at the bargaining table like we did in Kingston, in Petawawa, and here in Ottawa. The agreement that was negotiated will significantly increase salaries by 13.75% over 3 years. We hope that the three striking parties will return to the bargaining table. Madam Speaker, I wish to thank all employees working with our military bases and with our military families. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Madam Speaker, after 9 years of this Bloc Liberal government, the housing crisis is unprecedented. July 1st will go down in history, but not for the right reasons. This crisis is affecting not only large urban centres, but also our regions. In an article in La Presse this morning, the Quebec Police Association noted a significant increase in homelessness. This is a sad reality. It's caused by lack of housing and the rising cost of living. When will this Bloc-backed government stop announcing programs with even more bureaucracy and instead ensure that housing is built in the regions too? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, I appreciate the question. It's interesting because the member who asked the question supports a plan in which we don't build affordable housing. The member is in favor of increasing tax rates for new apartment construction. That is not okay, Madam Speaker. Our plan is to invest and to build affordable housing. For example, we just reached a deal with Quebec to build 8,000 housing units. Meanwhile, Madam Speaker, the Conservative Party leader, when he was housing minister, he managed to build a grand total of 6 housing units throughout the country. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Madam Speaker, at that point, rent was half as expensive. The government should really follow the situation more closely. Now, after 9 years, this government, with the support of the Bloc, has voted for $500 billion in centralizing inflationary budget spending that is driving up the price of everything, pushing more people into homelessness across Canada. The government's failure to control its spending is the cause of all these problems. Add to that a carbon tax, and you'll understand the situation today. When will this Bloc-backed Prime Minister stop wasting money so that Quebecers can start living and eating with dignity again? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a great deal of respect for the member for Beauce. He used to be the mayor of an important municipality in Beauce. Now, here's what I would like to know. How does he feel about the attitude of the Conservative leader? The Conservative leader, when he was housing minister, created a grand total of 6 housing units. And the Leader of the Opposition insults and continues to insult Quebec's municipalities and their leaders, calling them incompetent. How does he feel as former mayor of a Quebec municipality? How does he feel about being called incompetent by a Conservative leader who built only 6 housing units? The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Madam Speaker, does the minister know Nadia Gagné? Has he heard of Nadia Gagné? Nadia Gagné is a woman who lives in a van. For the past few days, she's been living in a van. Why? Because she no longer has housing. There are 24,000 people in Montreal waiting for an affordable housing unit. The minister often forgets the number 9. 2 terms as government plus 1. 9 years in government. Is he proud of his government's track record? Is he proud of the situation today caused by 9 years of his government? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the member. He's another member that I have a great deal of respect for. He is well respected and important in Quebec, and I thank him for bringing up Nathalie. There are many Nathalies and people like her in Quebec who need housing. It's a difficult situation in 2024 in Quebec. That's why people need a government that invests in them, not an official opposition who insults municipalities. Does he feel that insulting Quebec's municipalities is a sign of respect? The Honourable Member for Saint-Léonard, Saint-Michel.
Madam Speaker, the Conservatives continue to show their true colours. The Conservative leader said he'd override the rights of Canadians by using the notwithstanding clause. On Tuesday, the member for Peace River Westlock introduced a petition here in the House to restrict abortion access. And on the same day, every Conservative member voted against a bill that would provide contraceptives to women who can't otherwise afford it. And yesterday, coincidentally, an anti-choice March for Life protest was held here in Ottawa. Can the Minister of Health assure women across Canada that the
Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for her incredible advocacy in making sure that women have autonomy over their own bodies. And, you know, it was so disappointing on the one hand to see, and I understand over half of Conservative members are anti-choice, and to see them speaking about them telling our daughters and telling our sisters what they should do with their bodies. Now, that's upsetting enough, but then in the same order, to vote against women being able to get the reproductive medicine they need means that they want them to have no choice whatsoever about their bodies. Not a choice of—
Honourable Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of Employment pocketed money from his business partner, the same business partner that was lobbying the Minister's Department while securing $110 million in government contracts.
Wow.
Meanwhile, the Minister actively hid this shady arrangement from the Ethics Commissioner. For 2 weeks, the Minister has refused to answer the most basic question, so I will ask it again. How much did the Minister pocket? How much? How much? How much?
Here.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, the member well knows that the Minister has answered these questions, and of course he would not dare say the things that he just said in this chamber where he uses parliamentary privilege outside, because he knows to do so would have serious consequences.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Bring it on.
Madam Speaker,
That sounded like a threat.
This
Yeah.
NDP Liberal government,
Bring it on, he
the
said.
Armed Forces
Woo.
have 16,000 personnel vacancies and a crisis of morale, recruitment, and retention. That's why the Defence Committee unanimously voted to cancel the April 1st rent increase for base housing. Like other Canadians, our troops can't afford rent and groceries and know that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister show that he actually supports our troops and reverse the April 1st rent increase? Yes or no?
Here, here. Here, here. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I'll take no lesson, and I mean no lesson from the Conservative when it
Lalonde.
comes to defense spending. So, they let defense spending drop below 1%. They voted against actually a salary increase for our members. They voted against funding for Ukraine. They voted against Operation Unifier. They voted against $40 billion for NORAD modernization, and they badly mismanaged our procurement for years. So, Madam Speaker, today in this House, I have no lesson to take from that side.
The Honourable Member for Oxford.
You take an English lesson.
The Immigration Minister clearly stated that all international students undergo a criminal record check to enter Canada. That is false. Police certificates are not mandatory for international students that enter our country thanks to this Liberal government. This Immigration Minister is following the exact same reckless path of his predecessor, who notoriously lost 1 million people. Why did the Minister mislead Canadians, and can you tell us how many international students were let in without police clearances?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, for far too long, international students have been exploited and vulnerable from abuse and fraud.
No comment.
That's why we are taking concrete action. We implemented a new verification process to authenticate the acceptance letters. We raised financial requirements to ensure they are prepared for their lives in Canada. And recently we announced a national cap on student visas. Madam Speaker, we have a responsibility to ensure international students are set up for success, and that's exactly what we're doing.
The honourable member for Mississauga East Cooksville.
Madam Speaker, international trade is very important for
Vanessa.
Canada, supporting roughly 1 in 6 jobs nationwide. While Conservatives in this House voted against modernizing free trade with Ukraine, cheering on damaging and illegal bridge blockades, and supported Brexit, on this side of the House, we know that Canadian businesses, innovators, workers, and exporters benefit from a strong, stable, progressive, and rules-based international order. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade kindly update this House as to how the government is standing up for free trade on the global stage?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I had the honor of attending the OECD ministerial meeting where I met with key allies and stakeholders to discuss the importance of inclusive, resilient, and sustainable trade, especially in this face of rising populism and protectionism. We know that promoting free trade and investments grows the economy, creates good jobs right across Canada, and I'd like to thank the member for Mississauga East Cooksville for his important work as we work together to advance Canada's trade agenda. Thank you.
Honourable member for Esquimalt, Saanich-Sooke.
Madam Speaker, this government promised to remove criminal records for simple possession of drugs from more than 250,000 Canadians. After 2 years, we are still waiting for the government to act because the Liberals are saying this is hard to do. You know what's hard, Madam Speaker? Not being able to get employment or housing or to travel to see loved ones because of a criminal record. These records disproportionately impact Indigenous and racialized Canadians and all those living in poverty. Will the Liberals keep their promise and meet the November legal deadline to make sure all of these simple possession records are removed?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I greatly appreciate that question
Great.
as
Smelly
our
cat.
government agrees that, and we are committed to dealing with the systemic racism and discrimination that often is in our criminal justice system. It is why I welcome working with the member opposite to meet our November 2024 deadline to implement C5. Madam Speaker, we are working with partners like provinces and territories to do just that. There is more work to be done, but we are absolutely committed to creating a fair justice system because that creates safer communities.
À la suite de discussions entre les représentants.
Following discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, I understand that there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence in memory of Rex Murphy.
Honourable members to rise.
We're going to hang out for the Rex Murphy moment of silence if we're allowed. Much respect to Rex Murphy. He was amazing.
J'invite maintenant l'honorable député.
All right, so that wraps up question period for the day. But we do have so many more videos. I do have to apologize, guys. I start on time. I was running for 11 minutes with no stream. I showed a bunch of videos at the beginning, which I'm going to show a couple of them again because I've got entertaining pieces, gang. Let's get into it.
It's not my decision whether I get a bonus or not. This is performance pay.
Finally, something from the CBC worth watching. Now, unfortunately for the CBC, this wasn't something that they produced or created out of the $1.3 billion of tax money that they get every year. No, this happened at a parliamentary committee where the CEO of the CBC was defending the $16 million in executive bonuses that the CBC paid out, even as their viewership and their ad revenue and the trust in media have all declined. I got to ask the CEO, Catherine Tate, a few questions. You won't believe her response. Let's break it down.
So viewership, yes. Ad revenue, yes. Trust also, whether or not people can trust what they're seeing on TV, especially when you run news outlets. You would agree, I hope, that trust in media would also be a measure of success.
Absolutely.
Okay. And therefore errors would be another measure of success or failure. If there aren't a lot of errors, and that would be a good thing. If there are a lot of errors, that would be a bad thing. Would you agree on that?
Well, I actually would put a different response on error. I think error is a natural part of all journalism.
Did she actually just say that?
I think error is a natural part of all journalism.
Error is a natural part of journalism? I mean, journalism is supposed to be reporting the facts. This would be like saying malpractice is a natural part of medicine, or steroids is a natural part of professional sports.
And in the fact that CBC Radio-Canada posts its corrections as quickly as we do is actually a demonstration of why we are trusted.
That's their measure of trust. Not that they report the news accurately or that they do their very best to make sure the facts are correct before they put something online or on air. No, the CBC's measure of success in building trust with their viewers is how fast they correct the errors that they make. Unbelievable. Okay, let's keep rolling the tape.
So the speed with which you correct your errors is the way that you measure performance at the CBC. Okay. Well, so we've agreed that viewership is an important metric. We've agreed that ad revenue is an important metric. Trust as well. So fewer Canadians are watching the CBC than ever before. Viewership has plummeted to half of what it was when you became CEO in 2018. Ad revenue has also crashed. In fact, it was down 31% in just 1 year, 2022 to 2023. And trust in media, and especially in the CBC, has also declined. The NDP talk about misinformation. The CBC has had to issue more than 100 corrections to grave errors in reporting. And that obviously has an impact on trust. So given the fact that on all these important metrics that you've agreed on, what justification do you have to issuing performance awards?
I want to correct a couple of your points, if I may, Madam Chair. First of all, the 30% drop in revenue was between an Olympics year and a non-Olympics year. And in fact, in the years you're describing, we had 2 Olympic Games. And so we have a much higher level of revenue, ad revenue, during those years. So that explains the drop
Okay,
there.
So what she's acknowledging here is that CBC content itself doesn't get enough viewers to sell ads. It takes something as mammoth as a global Olympics, as the Olympic Games themselves, for them to get enough people watching to sell ads. That means that their regular lineup would be beaten by table tennis and badminton. Let's watch a couple more clips.
Television is in decline, not just at CBC, at CTV and global. Television is in decline, and people are moving to streaming, and they're moving to their connected television.
With all due respect, the CBC has almost $500 million in real estate holdings across the country. Big fancy buildings in downtowns across the country. You get over $1 billion in taxpayers' money to be a television broadcaster, radio broadcaster. When those metrics are down, how do you justify giving performance awards to people whose job it is to increase viewership, to increase ad revenue, to increase trust?
So I just asked the CEO how she could justify spending $16 million on executive bonuses after viewership is down, ad revenue is down, trust is down. Let's take a look at her response.
Madam Chair, if I may, I don't agree with the premise.
You don't agree that
I don't agree with the premise. 79% of Canadians say that it is important for the country to have a public broadcaster like CBC Radio-Canada.
Sounds impressive, right? That's a big number of Canadians that responded positively to the CBC. It got me thinking, who paid for the poll?
82% say...
Who commissioned that poll?
Those are our public perception surveys that we conduct.
Oh, you conducted, okay.
They paid for the poll. No surprise it would come back telling them what they wanted to hear. When you pay for a poll, you get to influence what questions are asked. That's very important. Ask the right question, you can get whatever answer you want.
All I would say is, if you believe that the fight against disinformation is something that touches all Canadians, regardless of political stripe, the public broadcaster remains the single most effective tool that we have as Canadians to combat this disinformation. We are the only national media company in the country.
The CEO would have you believe that the CBC is necessary to fight misinformation, yet she acknowledged that errors are a natural part of journalism, at least at the CBC. Add that to the fact that nobody's watching it.
It's very simple. Will she be given a bonus in 2020?
It's not my decision whether I get a bonus or not. First of all, these are not frivolous awards given at Christmas time. This is performance pay.
There you have it. Viewership down, ad revenue down, trust in media down. And while they're laying off workers across the country, they're paying executives big, fat bonuses. That's life at the CBC. Conservatives have a better idea. Let's just defund the CBC and stop wasting your tax dollars. Now, we can't cover all the things that are wrong with the CBC in one short video, so we're gonna have a much longer one coming. Like and subscribe to my channel and make sure you don't miss that. And as always, thanks for watching.
So I'll ask again, will you be up for a bonus in the consideration at the board meeting in June?
As I've said previously, this is part of an internal deliberation. It's an HR function, and we have to be respectful of it.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics. Hey gang, what's up? Just Ehren right here, Question Period Canada. Pretty excited to bring you a committee investigation clip. These are always wild. We got the heavy hitters, Larry Brock, Michael Barrett, Rick Perkins, Shannon Stubbs, Stephanie Kusi, Michael Cooper, Michael Chong, Michael Barrett. Let's get into it. They're always interesting. The witnesses are always difficult. That's part of the fun. Let's check out this crazy stuff that's happening in committee. Let's go.
Ms. Tate, in December on the 4th, you announced that 800 jobs would be cut from the CBC, 600 individuals would be fired, and 200 vacancies would not be filled, totaling 800. At that time, you were asked whether or not executives would be given bonuses for 2023. You said you weren't ruling it out. When you came to this committee, you confirmed once again that you were not ruling it out. In fact, you confirmed that a decision would be made by the end of March. Now it's May, and so I'm curious. Are you going to be awarded a bonus for 2023?
As I said at the time, Madam Chair, as I said at the time, we have a process which is very rigorous. After internal deliberations with the Board of Directors at our June board meeting, once we've had a chance to present the audited financial statements, there will be a discussion, and we will inform employees at that time of the decision that is taken.
Ms. Tate, an access to information was put forward by the Taxpayers Federation and asking for those 2023 bonus amounts. The CBC responded by saying that they would provide those, but not until May 10th. Today is May 7th, and so I'm curious if 3 days prior you would be able to give those numbers here. I'm sure you have them. You just have not agreed to release the documents yet. However, I did write you a letter. I gave you a heads up, so I'm curious if you'd share them here.
And I thank you. I thank the honourable member from Lethbridge for the opportunity to clarify a lot of misinformation that has been circulating regarding performance pay in 22-23. To be clear, CBC Radio-Canada...
I think there might have been a misunderstanding. I'm not asking about 2022. I'm asking about 2023. The
fiscal year 23-24?
I'm asking about the fiscal year 2023. That decision with regard to bonuses was made in March. Those are your words. You
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Decisions would be made.
Madam Chair, just for clarification, is Ms. Thomas asking about the fiscal year 22-23 or 23-24, just so that for avoidance of doubt?
It's not a point of order.
That's not a point of order, Madam Chair.
Well, but I think he's clarifying the question, so it's a point of clarification. I think Ms. Tate wishes to know what year you're referring to. Years go from 1 year to another, April to April.
I trust my time was stopped.
Yes, the time is stopped.
Thank you. I'm referring to the fiscal year of 2023, which ended in March of 2024.
So that's actually the fiscal year of 23-24, and for that year, we have not issued any performance pay because we have not yet reviewed the final results of the year that ended on March 31st, 24.
So, Ms. Tate, you are head of the management team. You confirmed at our last committee meeting that it is you and your management team that make that decision with regards to bonuses that are given out. You confirmed that that decision is made at the by no later than the end of March of 2024. And you then made the comment that the board would have to sign off on that recommendation in June. So I understand that the sign-off is coming up, but you do know what the recommendation is. So as of the end of March of 2024, what is the recommendation for your 2023 bonus?
As I've said previously, these conversations are subject to internal deliberations by the management team to the board of directors. We have not had that conversation with the board. That is scheduled for June 12th and 13th. We will have that conversation, at which point the final results will have been audited and reviewed by the Auditor General. We don't simply precipitously announce results when we haven't had the privilege of the auditor and our internal audit process. So those final results are being assembled right now, and they will be made available after.
Ms. Tate, have you been assigned a bonus for 2023? I realize the board hasn't signed off on it, but have you been assigned a bonus
No,
for
I have not.
2023? You have not been assigned a bonus for 2023?
I have not.
So for 2023, there is no bonus coming your way.
I do not know that I have a bonus because the process, as we have described, for governor and council positions is separate from performance pay. My process is that I will be evaluated by the board of directors. A letter of recommendation will go to the government, and the government will reflect upon whether or not I or other appointees would receive any performance pay.
Has the board package for that June meeting gone out?
No.
No. Okay, because you are a member of that board.
I am.
So you not only have a say with regard to bonuses for the top executives, yourself included, you have a say not only in March when you're a member of the management team, the most senior member of the management team, but then you get a second say at the board level. So with all due respect, you do have a fair bit of power in terms of bonuses. So I'll ask again, will you be up for a bonus in the consideration at the board meeting in June?
As I've said previously, this is part of an internal deliberation. It's an HR function, and we have to be respectful of the governance that rules the CBC Radio-Canada.
But you do know the answer.
I absolutely do not know the answer until I've had those deliberations with the board of directors. I cannot preemptively say what the results of a future conversation will be.
Sure, 39 seconds. You know what the recommendation is. You know what the recommendation is going forward to the board.
I think I've repeated myself enough to say these are matters that concern the organization that operates at arm's length like all Crown corporations, and I have to be respectful.
You did confirm that you are the senior member of the management team, which makes the decisions, and then those decisions get recommended to the board, which you are a member of the board. Therefore, you have access to information.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this question has been asked, I think, 6 times now.
I was about to mention that I think the question has been clearly asked and the answers have been clearly given, and so I think Ms. Thomas has got, she's got literally about 2 seconds left. Finish.
So, Chair, I just point of I guess, response to the point of order, since you're ruling it in favor. I just want to be sure then, no repeat questions are permitted at this table is the ruling of the Chair?
I don't think that was what the member suggested. I think he suggested that the question had been repeated over and over.
Okay.
The witness had answered over and over, and it was getting to be repetitious because the question was the same and the answers were exactly the same.
Thank you. Point of order, Chair.
Thank you.
I'm just looking for a ruling. What would be the number of times that would be appropriate to repeat a question?
There is no set number of times, but as a chair, I may decide on how the meeting moves forward.
There is
and
no
allow me to
appropriate
finish
number.
speaking, Ms. Thomas. Thank you.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics. What do you think, gang? Point of order, Mr. Chair. What is going on in these committee meetings? We do get the best of the best. Larry Brock. Garnet Genu.
Minister, have you read the Conflict of Interest Act?
Mr. Chair, I've read sections of the Conflict of Interest Act, but more importantly, when I transitioned from public life, from private life to public life, I spent numerous meetings, numerous phone calls with the team at the Conflict of Interest so that my business interests could be wrapped up in a way that meets all obligations under the Act. And, Mr. Chair, if I can point to these two stories in the press, they indicate that I followed my obligations,
Minister,
and that is what's on the record.
Minister, I asked you a question. You said you did read the Conflict of Interest Act. Good. Section.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics. Hey gang, what's up? Just Ehren right here, Question Period Canada. Pretty excited to bring you a committee investigation clip. These are always wild. We got the heavy hitters, Larry Brock, Michael Barrett, Rick Perkins, Shannon Stubbs, Stephanie Kusi, Michael Cooper, Michael Chong, Michael Barrett. Let's get into it. They're always interesting. The witnesses are always difficult. That's part of the fun. Let's check out this crazy stuff that's happening in committee. Let's go.
Minister, have you read the Conflict of Interest Act?
Mr. Chair, I've read sections of the Conflict of Interest Act, but more importantly, when I transitioned from public life, from private life to public life, I spent numerous meetings, numerous phone calls with the team at the Conflict of Interest so that my business interests could be wrapped up in a way that meets all obligations under the Act. And, Mr. Chair, if I can point to these two stories in the press, they indicate that I followed my obligations,
Minister,
and that is what's on the record.
Minister, I asked you a question. You said you did read the Conflict of Interest Act. Good. Section 4 of the Conflict of Interest Act provides a conflict of interest occurs when a public officer holder exercises a duty or function that provides an opportunity to further their private interests or another person's private interests. That's exactly
that is not
what
is
you did, Minister.
No, not at
not
all.
Only did Navis
Mr.
Group
Chair,
lobby your department,
there was a contravention of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Act,
$9.74 million check
to
Navis's client. You furthered your business partner's interests in delivering funding for their client, and you furthered your own interests because you were being paid by Navis.
Mr. Cooper.
You were pocketing money from the lobbying firm Navis.
That is false.
Owned by your,
that is not true, Mr. Cooper.
It's in your public disclosures.
That is not true.
Who paid you? So you have received not 1 cent from Navis Group. Is that correct?
You said that I was pocketing money, which is not true.
Did you receive money from the Navis Group?
I have not made any income. I've not worked for any client since being elected. So
how
you
much
stated
money,
a falsehood.
How much money have you received from the Navis Group since you were appointed to cabinet?
I have received funds into my business that were cleared through the ethics commissioner that happened while I was a private citizen. All of that information, all of those activities were while I was a private citizen. When I transitioned from being a private citizen to a public citizen, I spoke numerous times to the team of the ethics commission, and so I received those payments are in the those funds are in the disclosure. And if you want to know how much money I made as a private citizen, I direct you to the Commissioner of Ethics.
I ask you then to just answer the question. How much money were you paid by Navis Group? How much?
That
Since
information is with the conflict of interest, and I have not made any funds. Now, Mr. Chair, Mr. Cooper is trying to indicate that somehow I had only one client or only one relationship while I was private consultant.
Minister, since you won't answer the question.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics. What do you think, gang? Point of
is to also have a climate plan. That is what our customers, Canada's customers, are requiring. That is what foreign investors are requiring. And we're seeing the results. In 2023, Canada had more FDI per capita than any other G7 country. That's because we have a strong economic plan that includes a strong climate plan.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics. Hey gang, what's up? Just Ehren right here, Question Period Canada. Pretty excited to bring you a committee investigation clip. These are always wild. We got the heavy hitters, Larry Brock, Michael Barrett, Rick Perkins, Shannon Stubbs, Stephanie Kusi, Michael Cooper, Michael Chong, Michael Barrett. Let's get into it. They're always interesting. The witnesses are always difficult. That's part of the fun. Let's check out this crazy stuff that's happening in committee. Let's go.
Minutes. We're starting with MP Holland, please, for the first 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, do you think it was fair to increase the carbon tax 23% when 70% of Canadians told you not to, as 2 million Canadians visit a food bank in a single month? Was that fair?
Mr. Hallen, 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back than they pay in with the price on pollution. We also know that the only way to have a credible, effective economic plan in 2024 is to also have a climate plan. That is what our customers, Canada's customers, are requiring. That is what foreign investors are requiring. And we're seeing the results. In 2023, Canada had more FDI per capita than any other G7 country. That's because we have a strong economic plan that includes a strong climate plan.
Minister, your carbon tax is actually a tax plan and not an environmental plan, and the PBO on multiple occasions came to this committee and proved a lot of the stuff you're saying is misinformation and false. For example, he said just a few weeks ago that a majority of families pay more into this carbon tax than what they get into these rebates that you're talking about. Last time you were here, for example, in your own words, an average Albertan family gets $1,800 in rebates, but I have the PBO report here in my hand that says an average Albertan family pays $2,900 into the carbon tax. Do you think it's fair that an average Albertan family has to pay $1,100 more into the tax? Is that fair to them?
Mr. Hallen, I think the people who are trafficking in misinformation when it comes to a price on pollution are, I'm sad to say, the Conservatives.
PBO wrong?
The average 8 out of 10 Canadian families, very much including Alberta families,
but he said
get
a majority
more
of families
money
are worse
back
off.
than they
Is he wrong?
pay in on a price on pollution. That is simply the reality. It has been verified by economists across the country, including the most esteemed economists in Alberta. The reality is this is a revenue neutral plan which is giving money back to Alberta families, and I am delighted that we are now giving money back to small businesses across the country, including small businesses in Alberta. And the final thing that is just so important, and it's important for the province you and I love a lot, Alberta, is the only way for us as an open, trade-exposed economy to have an economic plan that actually works, to actually be able to attract foreign investment, to actually be able to sell what we produce, is to have a strong and credible climate plan. That's what our government has.
So, Minister, I think it's clear to see that by you ducking and dodging the facts that you absolutely are still peddling misinformation about the carbon tax. And someone who claims to love Alberta wouldn't take extra $1,100 in a carbon tax and what they get in rebates. So I just want to make that clear. Recently, as I move on, Mark Carney just testified yesterday at the Senate committee. Someone who will probably be your next leader, and as someone who's rumored to be also a leadership candidate in the next Liberal leadership race. We saw Mark Carney also duck and dodge the question of if he supported the carbon tax. So before you launch your campaign, we wanted to know, will you continue down the path of Justin Trudeau and quadruple the carbon tax?
So, Mr. Hallen, I'm not sure the best use of this committee's precious time is to indulge in political speculation
I think
and political
Canadians need
horse
to know
racing.
if you're
I'm
running
sorry,
for
Mr. Hallen, I didn't
leadership,
interrupt you with your very
you'll quadruple the
long
tax.
comments. And so now I would ask you politely to do me the same courtesy. So let me just be clear, because you have waded pretty far into waters of political speculation. Our party has a leader, and our government has a prime minister. He has the full support of our cabinet and our
Fair
caucus.
enough, Minister, because I have a short amount of time.
Mr.
So
Halland, please don't interrupt
on
me.
that note,
You used up your precious time speculating about party politics. You leave me
And
no
as a
choice
follow-up
but
to that
you give
question,
me no
Minister,
choice but to answer.
I just
and I'm
wanted to
quite
ask,
happy.
then do you
I'm sorry,
support
Mr. Halland.
his
I didn't
quadrupling?
interrupt you.
Halland, if we could just try to find the right balance here so we can hear and,
Sure.
and we can get some answers.
I'll move on then. Because
I wasn't finished with
wanted
my
to know-
answer, Mr.
That's
Halland.
fine. I'll take my time
Point of
because I
order.
only have a limited amount
Point
of
of order.
time.
Chair, I think it's customary for when members ask questions to give witnesses equal a weighted amount of time to answer. And I don't believe that the minister has had her time to answer.
So what I do ask is for respect here in the room, and we do have the minister. It is precious time. We have 1 hour. I'm sure you want to hear from the minister, and MP Allen, I'm sure you want to pose your questions. So let's find, like I said, the right balance to make this happen.
I'll move on to my next question because I only have a limited amount of time. Minister, under the 9 years of your government, rents have doubled, literally. They were half what they were before your government took over. Rent prices are outpacing income for the first time in 60 years. Your $89 billion photo op slush fund, supposedly for housing, after you announced that, has doubled rents. I want to know, how did you spend $89 billion to double rents?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Halland. And I am actually glad to see all of us paying attention to housing. I think it is one of the most pressing issues for Canada and Canadians, and that is why with this budget and with action we have taken, our government has put forward the most ambitious plan to get more homes built faster in Canadian history. With all of the measures taken together, will mean that nearly 4 million new homes are built by 2031. That is what Canada needs. That is what we are doing. That's what we're investing in. And conservative austerity will not accomplish that. It's also you also offer me a nice opportunity to point out that when your current leader was responsible for housing, he managed to get only 6 homes built. That is a record we're happy to stand against any day of the week.
Thank you, Minister, and we're going to...
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics. What do you think, gang? Point of
But no matter what the minister yells and flails about, it's clear that the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost, because after 8 years, Canadians can hardly afford to eat, heat, and house themselves. Near Lakeland, the Cold Lake Food Bank said last year was their busiest ever. Quote, "We gave out over 6,000 hampers throughout the year. So far this year hasn't slowed down." 6,000, by the way, is 40% of the town's population. And 1 million more Canadians will be forced to go to food banks this year over last. But this Prime Minister, he plans to quadruple his carbon tax anyway. So when will the Prime Minister cancel his April cruel day, spike the hike and axe the tax?
It's a crazy time in Canada, right? As we learn about these Canadian federal politics right here on Question Period Canada. My name's Ehren. Let's get into this crazy video, man. It doesn't slow down in Canadian federal politics. Let's take a peek.
While the radical extremist environment minister quoted an anti-energy activist group called Environmental Defence in the House of Commons about emissions reductions in Canada, I'm just going to focus on your government's actual federal national inventory report on emissions and ask you some questions about whether or not the carbon tax is actually worth the cost, since it is not reducing Canada's emissions to date. The The fact is, of course, Canada has missed every single one of your government's emissions reductions targets, despite your increase of the carbon tax every year since you've implemented it. And Canadians know that emissions have increased each one of those years, except for during 2020, when governments locked Canadians down and the economy was severely damaged by those restrictions. In 2021, you said 2019 would be the last year of emissions increases in Canada, but just last week, your federal government's national inventory reported that Canada's emissions in 2022 were up from 698 million tons in 2021 and 686 million tons in 2020. During 2022, they were at 708 million tons. So will you just simply admit that your carbon tax is not worth the cost and it's failed to reduce Canada's emissions?
Thank you for the question. I would say a few things to that. I mean, the first is I know that folks on the Conservative side of the House often talk about missing targets, but the only target this government has ever had was the 30% below 2005 levels that we inherited from Prime Minister Harper. That's a 2030 target. We actually have made it more ambitious, so it's 40 to 45%. And there's a milestone that we actually implemented in the Act that went through Parliament that is a 2026 number, and we are fully on track to meet that. So we are on track to meet the targets that we actually have established. In terms of the National Inventory Report, what it shows is Canada actually has reduced emissions by 8% versus the 2005 level. It is on track to achieve the targets for 2030, so we are making good progress on the way there. And it also shows that actually 24 of those megatons in 2030, 79 or 78 of the megatons actually come from the carbon price. So it's almost a third of the reductions come from the carbon price.
Minister, you can forgive Canadians for not being compelled by your comparison to a number in 2005. You've been in government for 9 years, so let's just talk about what your claims have been, what your policies are, and what the outcomes have been. What your policy has been was to spike the carbon tax by 25% on April 1st, despite 8 premiers asking you not to, and despite more Canadians unable to feed themselves, house themselves, heat and cool themselves when they're needed. Your response has been your Liberal senators holding up Conservative Bill C-234 that would provide carbon tax exemptions on farmers and farm fuels at exactly a time when Canadian farmers are struggling to be able to produce food and Canadians can't afford to eat.
One more quick question here. Minister Guilbeault, the Environment Minister, said that the government does not measure the annual amount of emissions that are directly reduced by carbon pricing. Now, the Minister of Natural Resources here just said that there was I don't have the exact number that he said, but somewhere about a third of carbon reductions will be directly attributed to the carbon tax. So, who's telling the truth?
Mr. Chair, I don't know if Debbie, if you have anything on the, I don't have anything more, so I'll have to come back to you on that, sir.
Thank you.
So yes, come and join the gang. I'm Ehren. This is Question Period Canada. We do wonder about a lot of things here. We have a fun community where we watch the live question periods daily. That's a great time. Come and check out one of the live shows. We make all these other videos. If you see something above 8 minutes, I'll make a comment. If not, I'm just gonna show you what I'm learning. You can judge for yourself. That's the idea. I care about Canadians in the grocery store lineups that can no longer afford their bills, and that's what we're doing. We're trying to learn about Canadian federal politics right here. Like, learn, subscribe, share, get notified. Getting notified is important for those live
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Maybe there's a little grass growing right along here. Some happy little things.
I love you. You love me. We all own our own bodies, so marry who you want and do whatever drugs you choose. And when it's time, you can die with dignity by determining your own end-of-life plan.
Hi, Maria!
Hi, Officer Winkles!
How you doing today?
I don't have to answer that question.
That is correct!
I'm recording you!
Am I being detained?
Nope!
Which I can legally do because I'm in a public place!
Come back if you have a warrant!
Alrighty!
Know your rights!
Yay!
Okay, Gumshoes, Carmen Sandiego is in a country where socialism failed. That narrows it down to Venezuela, Cuba, the former Soviet Union, Moldova, Laos, Vietnam, Albania, Angola.
So we did some digging into your past.
Oh, the suspense is killing me! But we still haven't solved the case, Holmes. Why is marijuana a Schedule 1 drug?
Elementary, my dear Watson. Nixon and racism.
What?
You okay? I don't know. Hey, man, it's alright. It's alright. We've got qualified immunity. Qualified immunity. It's not for you, it's just for me. I shot your dog. I shot your wife. I get to go on with my life.
My favorite part is where the character says, I do not want green eggs and ham. And then Sam I Am says, that's fine. You don't have to eat them. That's your right. The end. It's a short book.
Here we see one of the last taxicab monopolies struggling for life. Competitors have entered their ecosystem.
Do you know what eminent domain abuse is? It's when the government decides the neighborhood of make-believe is better used by a Taiwanese LCD manufacturer.
Today we have a real senator. Hello, Senator.
How are you doing?
What is your favorite color?
I would have to say blue.
Me too. Tell me, why did you sell all your stock right before the crash?
I mean, it's literally just the tragedy of the commons, but they made it cute.
And that sound means we're in international waters. I'm gonna marry a robot and sell my kidney on eBay.
My dearest Rowena, today the district attorney filed criminal charges against a two-door sedan.
Carmen Sandiego is hiding in a country that contains an American military base. Is she in Australia, Bahrain, Belgium, Brazil, Bulgaria, the British Indian Ocean Territory, Cuba, Germany, Djibouti?
Menace.
Circle, square, rectangle, war factory.
All right, Jack, where is your gay wedding cake?
I refuse to bake a gay wedding cake, and you can't force me to. It's my right.
That is your right, but it is my right to kick you off of this show. Please leave.
Yep.
You homophobic bearded meat goblin.
I just want enough to warm it up some. I don't want to set it on fire. It's very easy to set it on fire.
Well, today on This Old House, we're at the city zoning office because they think our new porch is 2 inches too close to the sidewalk, which is f***ing bullshit because their sidewalk is too far away from the street, which they'd know about if they'd read any of the emails I'd sent them over the past 18 months. So join us as we waste our whole f***ing day on this shit.
The premiere of Thomas the High-Speed Rail has been delayed. Again. And at the 10 Bitcoin level, you receive a handsome tote bag.
Quack! Good one! Quiet! Very good! Queen! What else starts with the letter Q?
Space lasers.
Oh.
John Podesta and Hillary Clinton had an email exchange about hot dogs.
Where do we get these puppets?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and you have a right to defend your house with firearms. With firearms.
Remind all members that other
Have a good weekend, everybody. We'll be back with maybe a show tonight. Who knows? We're going to wrap up for now. Thank you so much for watching. It's a pretty fun Friday. TGIF. Take care, guys.